Welcome to the Marvel Events Timeline, the podcast that takes you on a journey through Timely, Atlas, and Marvel Comics, one event at a time. Here are your hosts, Travis Bowe and Brian Lockhart.
Welcome to Marvel Events Timeline. My name's Travis.
My name's Brian.
How's it going, sir?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
You're not a guest.
Well, that's true.
You're a host.
I've been guesting so much, I forgot what it was like to host.
Right. Welcome to your new podcast, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking me to join you on this journey through the time stream.
Absolutely. We're gonna talk some comics in a very long format.
Yeah, extremely long from where we're starting from. So that should be it should be an adventure.
Absolutely. Before we get into what the plan is for Marvel Events Timeline, let's I guess introduce the people, the wonderful listeners at home to who we are.
Well, Travis, I would say please introduce yourself.
Well, I have been podcasting over at Real Comic Heroes since 2015, and over there we do a comic book movie podcast, and kind of like you'll find out in this show, the format is really just stolen from that podcast. Essentially, we made a big list of comic book movies. We started in 1951 with Superman and the Mole Men, and we're working towards the present, reviewing movies as we go. And so that's kind of what we're going to do on this podcast. We're going to jump back into the late 30s and early 40s and talk about comics and work towards the present. So yeah, that's my long-running podcast, Real Comic Heroes. And then I did a podcast called Watchmen Minute, where myself and fellow Movies by Minutes podcaster Eric Nash, we looked at the director's cut of Zack Snyder's Watchmen 1 minute at a time, which I know sounds crazy.
Well, at least it wasn't 4 hours like the Snyder cut of
there you
Justice
go.
League.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I mean, you're infinitely qualified for this format, considering it's a Movies by Minutes kind of sister show, but also your Real Comic Heroes, and your Movies by Minute was done on a comic book movie. So
yeah. What about you, sir? Where can other people find you? What have you been up to?
Well, I am the co-host of the Marine Corps Movie Minute with my co-host Jack Perry. He was a fellow Marine with myself, and we decided to review movies 1 minute at a time using the Movie by Minute format, but focusing on movies of the Marine Corps. We completed Heartbreak Ridge, which is a Clint Eastwood classic, as I like to call it. It's not as well known as some of the other Marine Corps movies or movies starring Marines, like A Few Good Men or, say, Full Metal Jacket, but it's one of my favorites, and so we started there. That's completed, but we're currently on hiatus. At some point, I will get around to Full Metal Jacket, which is the one everybody knows.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that's really my history with podcasting. That was my kind of first jump right into it, and it's a fun format that I'm looking forward to doing it again. In the meantime, while currently being on a hiatus, I'm pretty much guesting on any show that'll have me.
Yeah.
So it's fun to be a guest. You have none of the responsibility and all the fun.
For sure. Yeah. I guess if listeners aren't aware of the Movies by Minutes format, it was started, I think, back in 2013 by Pete and Alex over at Star Wars Minute, and they've kind of set the bar as far as that format, and really it just kind of grew out of that, and several other podcasters took a movie franchise of their own and broke it down. Not every show sticks to the same exact format, but essentially it's, you're looking at a movie 1 minute at a time and really just getting granular with the details and the subject matter. And that's kind of what we're going to do on this show. We're not going to necessarily look at every page, at a time or anything like that, but we're gonna kind of take that training, I guess, that we got from doing movies by minute podcasting, and use that to kind of help us examine the comics that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, because as what is precedent, you have to start at the beginning. You have to go release order.
Absolutely.
And comics being the type of medium that it is, and you always need to get the next issue, and you always need to, find out one event leads into the next. Ironically, we're talking about events. You got to. It's best to start at the beginning because everything kind of builds from there, and so that's what we're doing, but also the granular. All right, let's look at some of the behind the scenes stuff, or let's look at some of the meat of this actual issue instead of just talking about the plot, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, I think that probably kind of covers what we've been up to as far as podcasting goes. It's as far as like the movies by minutes community, it's a big community. There have been meetups, we've met people, we've come, like friend groups have formed, out of that community, and there's a big Facebook kind of massive group where everyone can kind of talk to each other and everything. So it's become quite the community. And hopefully we have a little bit of that, with this show, and we build our own community. But like you said, we got to start somewhere, and we're going to start at the beginning. Right.
Yeah, it works. And just before I forget, I do want to mention, since we did mention Movies by Minutes, we've talked about it in the good community that is, there is moviesbyminutes.com, and you can get a list of all the shows that have used that format in some form or another. There's about 200 as of recording time,
which is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they're like, this is like you said, like this is kind of a spin-off of that. Like I would say like a sister show or something like that, but then there are also other people that are doing like music, one album at a time, and it kind of has evolved from there. So
yeah, it's a very versatile format, and it's really
TV shows one episode at a time, that sort of thing.
Yeah, if I ever get bold and ambitious, I want to do Jag 1 minute at a time, because that's one of those shows where it's so dumb but it's so good. But I would say that this comics issue by issue or event by event, as we're doing, fits well into that format, because you have clear stopping points of the issue itself, but also the event or crossover or whatever you want to do. We end up talking about that episode.
Should we talk about our comic book history and like where we come from, as far as what we've read, what we grew up reading, actually talk about comic books for a minute?
Yeah, certainly, since that's the focus of this show, we might as well, yes, we're podcasters, but we're comic book fans first.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so what about you? So Travis, how did you get into comics? Like what was your first issue that you remember either buying on your own or at least reading?
I know the first comic that I owned was it was Batman number 498. And actually, my sister bought it for me. We were in an Osco drugstore, and this would have been in August of '93. As far as like when the issue came out, Batman 498. It's the issue directly after Bane breaks Batman's back.
Oh,
and so the cover, I remember just seeing the cover, and it's Bane and Catwoman, and Bane is just like pulling at the cape and cowl, like he's stretching it, like ripping it apart almost. I just remember that, like that just was so striking to me. I just kind of had to have it, That's definitely the first comic that I was like, please buy me that. And then around the same time in grade school, I was into the comic book trading cards a lot, especially the 1992, I think, maybe 93 Skybox collection of like Jim Lee illustrated X-Men trading cards. Like it was just a set of X-Men cards that Jim Lee drew every single card. So those were big.
Yeah, those trading cards were huge back then, and I had
Yeah.
most of those sets. I wasn't a big, baseball card collector or anything like that, but
Yeah.
I got big into those cards.
Yeah. So I think like right around that same time, I mean, I was trading cards back and forth, and I mean, all my allowance money was going to comic book cards, and then that somehow kind of transitioned into the kids that I was buying or trading these cards with. Someone eventually brought in a comic book and said, do you want this? And I definitely remember one of those first issues was. It'd be Spider-Man number 27. It's titled "There's Something About a Gun" from October of '92.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like it deals with some kid being bullied on the playground, and then he gets a gun from I think his brother, and he brings it to school, and somehow Spider-Man gets involved and stops him before he makes a bad decision. And I had that issue. I read it tons of times. And then somewhere around there, I remember Wolverine number 50 was a big issue for me because it had like this bright yellow cover that with 3 slash marks in it that were, die cut. So you could see the cover underneath that. And it was like a file folder of like Wolverine's, memories and like his history, because that issue dealt with like he's in a Weapon X facility and they have like sets of his previous memories and like someone going to great lengths to like confuse him basically. And from that point it was just disconnected comics. I would pretty much get anything I could get my hands on, especially Spider-Man and X-Men, Wolverine. I mean, I didn't have any 2 issues that were back to back, so I could never follow a storyline until much later. It probably until 1997 when the Deadpool like his first ongoing series came out. That's probably when I first started buying one particular book, over and over. I mean, that one and that's even like going to Walmart and or drugstores and like trying to just find just randomly finding the next issue. I had never stepped foot in a comic book store at that point. So
Yeah, it was a lot easier to find comics on the street back then.
yeah. Yeah. That's my like early days as far as getting into comics. And then, I'm buying like random other things, X-Men and things like that. But that was really what got me into comics. And of course, Batman the Animated Series, the Spider-Man animated series, and X-Men, like those were big factors into getting me into the characters. So, what about you? Like, what's your early comic book history?
I mean, I got pictures of myself as like a 1-2-year-old in Superman underoos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Birthday parties. I had a neighbor whose birthday was 2 days after mine or before mine, so she was Wonder Woman and I was Superman on the cake. Stuff like that. And
Yeah.
and for me, I just always kind of grew up with it. I remember watching the old 70s Spider-Man TV show / movie of the week type thing. I loved it. It's garbage, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Superman, Christopher Reeve. How can you not love that guy as Superman? I love Superman. I had a lot of the toys. I had a couple of the Megos or Mego. I always call them Mego, but I think they're Mego. And I had some of those as a kid. I just kind of grew up liking Spider-Man, liking Superman. Those are 2 main guys. There's Incredible Hulk TV series I used to catch.
Sure.
I love that. Wonder Woman TV show. I mean, just really just pop culture, Spider-Man, His Amazing Friends, all that type of thing. So I was already primed to want to read comics based on my love of these characters through coloring books and anything else I can get my hands on. I distinctly remember buying my first comic at a Wegmans grocery store, which is Wegmans isn't the Wegmans that it was back then that it is now. It was just a local grocery store, and they had a spinner rack, and I grabbed Marvel Tales number 214 from 1988. So I assume I got it right around when it came out. It was just on a spinner rack, and it was at the time I had no idea that Marvel Tales was a reprint of either Marvel Team Up or Amazing Spider-Man. Typically,
Was that did that have Aunt May and Doc Ock on the cover?
no. This one is Spider-Man tackling Nightcrawler on a roller coaster at like a fair.
Okay. Yeah.
And in the corner is Punisher with a shotgun, and it says, "and a cameo by Punisher."
Huh.
And I was like, I gotta get this thing, and
Yeah.
and I think it also is it ends with the Punisher on a gondola about to shoot both of them or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just remember, this is the greatest thing ever. I mean, I didn't know anything about the Punisher. I thought Nightcrawler was a bad guy, but it was such a cool cover. And again, it wasn't until years later that I realized that most of the Marvel Tales I ended up getting at some point were all reprints of Marvel team-ups with a few Amazing Spider-Mans in there, thrown in. So that was my first actual comic I bought. Every once in a while I would go back and I believe it was mostly Marvel Tales that I would grab an issue from the spinner rack. So at some point somebody brought into school, and this was probably around 5th grade. And that's about this. I was probably in 5th grade when I bought that comic the first time. There was also the greatest Batman stories ever told, like kind of not graphic novel, I guess, which was just reprints of all the old 30s.
Sure.
There was a bunch of different ones. And I remember that kind of making its way around school and just kind of being fascinated by that, but not really having the attention span to sit there and read the whole thing and just kind of thumbing through it. But but like I said, I was already kind of hooked because of that Spider-Man. So I think it was right around 7th grade when I really got all in, because I distinctly remember somebody bringing in Uncanny X-Men number 272. It was part 7 of the Extinction Agenda. It was Jim Lee. And the only thing I remember about it, I actually do remember, I was going to say, the only thing I remember is the cover, which is Storm standing there with Cable and Archangel and Wolverine all looking at just as badass as they can. But I didn't know who any of these characters were, not at all. And then I do remember it looking in the issue, and spoiler alert, this is when Storm becomes Storm again. And I was just like, wow, what the hell's going on? But I love it.
Yeah.
And so from there, I was like, I really was kind of more into comics. I wanted to know more. I think some people brought some in here and there. So this is where I really turn up the juices of becoming a junkie and really getting hooked. Is there was a Sears catalog for at Christmas time, had it was 1991, I think, was the first year they did it. And they did it for a couple of years, but it was this collector set of comics. It was it came with it came with a orange box with Wolverine, Hulk, Spider-Man, Captain America on it, and it says Marvel Comic Book Collection, and it was a small box, not a long box, but it was small, but it was orange and black. I still have it. I still have it. It came with a bunch of bags, a Marvel Superheroes poster, which I had on my wall for years. It was the old school kind of versions of the classic versions of the characters, you would think.
Yeah.
It was just,
you said it came with bags. What were the bags?
Just plastic Mylar bags, no boards. I don't think it came with boards. And then it came with 2 comic book collecting books, talking about one was a collector's a price edition, a price guide.
Oh yeah.
And another told us, I remember reading about it. It says, if you go to conventions, some people like to dress up. So when I finally went to my first convention, probably in 9th grade, I was a little disappointed it wasn't San Diego Comic-Con, because I didn't, you're reading about it. You didn't know it was some hotel ballroom that they, just some guys with long boxes put out, but it didn't matter. I still loved it, and I still bought whatever I could. And it came with random, it came with 25 to 50 comics, I think, or maybe 25, and they were all just random. Some was Ghost Rider. I think I got a Conan, a Gru. There's just some,
sure.
Some it were garbage, but some were Marvel Tales. Just a Namor. I remember it was it was just, but it was it was a sampling of what was available.
Yeah,
and that was enough for me. But I had a friend of mine, and it was probably about 8th grade by the time I started doing this. His older brother had a bunch of comics that he was no longer into. Now, I'm pretty sure my friend probably stole them from his older brother and didn't actually get permission, but he started selling them to me. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't really have, I didn't have any access to money, so I would basically skip lunch and I'd buy all these comics at cover price. But they were a little bit older, so they were like 75 cents or $1 at the most. I think at the time comics were like $1, and I was buying these for like 75 cents. So I'd save as much money as I could, and I ended up getting a ton of old Amazing Spider-Man around the gang war time.
Okay.
Where he's in the black. They were mostly black costume Spider-Man. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. That was a really cool series, or it was like Peter Parker Spider-Man. I forget, but it was like I got those, and I can't think who wrote them, but it was somebody famous that would go on to do other stuff, and it was just. I just loved it because a lot of the stuff was more Spider-Man was kind of dealing with a lot more of the dark stuff then, and he was dealing with a lot more street level, gang activity and just it wasn't. It was often that you see Daredevil or Punisher show up in these issues. In fact, that's how I ended up getting the Kraven's Last Hunt was through. Collecting from my friend's older brother. and so I got all those issues and it was like the Rose. I was like, man, I thought the Rose was the best villain, ever. And I was like, this is so cool. I had the origin of the Hobgoblin, when they revealed, I was like, man, I was so sucked in because it was such good stuff that I had no context of, but I was just getting them basically one issue at a time. And I was reading them. But the other thing I got too was like almost every issue of Marvel's Transformers. I'm only missing like 5 issues.
Oh, wow.
Because he had almost all of them. And then by the time I actually like started regularly going to a comic shop, there was maybe a gap of, I'd probably say about 10 where, where I was like, oh, like the series is still out there and I would just get whatever I could. But it was, they're not great, but there's some good stuff in there. And that's what really got me hooked. From there, it was like, once I got a paper route, my dad would take me at least once a month, if not twice a month to the comic shop, and I would just save my money for my paper route. And I remember walking around and I would grab everything that interested me, either because I wanted the next issue or it was a cool cover. Yeah. And then I would have to do the mental math in my head.
Yep.
And I would start putting stuff back as I would walk around the store. And my dad would sit out there and read while he was waiting for me, and because he knew I was going to take forever, and he'd humor me, and I would just like walk around and just put stuff back. And finally, I'm like, okay, I make my decision, I lay them all out, and I got this, and it was great when comics were $1 because I always knew how much I was going to spend. Once they started, $1.25, I was like, oh, come on, I got to do extra math now. But yeah, I was a big junkie until about the time I joined the Marine Corps, and of course that kind of put things on hold for a while.
Sure.
And actually, here and there, I would pick stuff up. I remember Operation Zero Tolerance was out at the time. And I was like, man, that sounds pretty cool. Let me, I would get a couple issues here and there, but nothing ever really stuck. I really couldn't get into it, and I really didn't have the finances for it. But once I got out, and it was like right around 2000 when they kind of Marvel had a renaissance. They really revitalized themselves, I think, and I was buying everything I could get my hands on, and not so much now. Now I mostly focus on the Marvel app,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was a big junkie for a long time.
Yeah, I kind of paused. Like I said, when I got regularly buying stuff in 97, 98, I was finally kind of like you. Like I'd get taken to a comic book store, like in 98, 99. And I would just buy whatever I kind of could with whatever money I had. I remember doing that comic book math of like, this is $1.99, this is $2.99, how many can I get with my $10 or whatever. Putting things back because it's like, oh, I don't have enough, and then like I don't know if I took a break, because I definitely remember like there's a little bit of a gap between 2000 and like 2000, I don't know, 3 or 4, not a big gap, but like then I got into buying Spawn comics in 2002-ish, 2003 maybe. Got super into Spawn, so I was trying to buy every back issue I could, and at that point it was a 10-year-old, comic, comic series. So I was trying to buy everything. I started reading through all those, and like I bought way more than I've read. I still haven't gone through the entire run of Spawn because I was like, I'm gonna buy them all, and then one day I'm just gonna sit down and read them all. I haven't done that, but read a good chunk of them. But and then I definitely remember getting into, I think around 2005 or 6, I got a subscription to Amazing Spider-Man, just a straight up like through the mail. You could do Marvel comics through the mail.
Oh yeah.
And I was doing, Amazing Spider-Man. I think I had like Amazing Spider-Man, Captain America, and I don't know, maybe one other one.
I did the same thing. Those exact two.
Yeah.
Once I started, that was the other thing. When I started having a little bit of money from a paper route, I saw that you could, I filled out the little subscription thing, and those were the two that I got consistently: Amazing Spider-Man and Captain America.
And then I remember going into what became my longtime comic book shop, because we have like 3 or 4 in town that I would just kind of go to, if I was on this side of town, I'd go to this one. I wasn't really loyal to any one comic book shop. And then I went into, it's called Comic Book University. I think at the time it was Downtown Comics. It was like a branch, there were 4 downtown comics, one on the north side, one on the south side, and then one east and west. And I would go to the one on the south side, and then that guy, he bought the store out and became Comic Book University. But it's like I walked into the store, and he was the first guy to ever be like, hey, do you want to start a pull list, and I can just pull everything you want for a month, and you come in whenever, I'll pull everything you want for the week, and then you come in and pay for them or whatever. And that was right around the time that World War Hulk was happening, because I think I had just read Planet Hulk as like the collected, hardcover collected thing. And so he started pulling World War Hulk, and then, that's around, I don't know, that's late, like 2007, 2008, maybe.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah.
That was around Civil War time, like Fallout.
Yeah.
2006 was Civil War, I think, so that was like right after. Yeah.
So I'm buying like that kind of stuff. And then I think I went in, so that became my comic book store. And then I went in one day and I was like, I've only ever read a handful of DC comics, like some Superman stuff, some Batman stuff. And then I was like, what should I do DC wise? And he was like, well, check out Green Lantern. So I started reading Green Lantern, and this was like this was probably like 2010. And it's like right as they're starting to introduce like the different colored lanterns. So you get like, I think the Red Lanterns were the first like other colored lantern, aside from like Sinestro with
yellow.
The yellow.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the Red Lanterns were a big deal. So I start reading that, and that's right around, what was that, countdown to 52? Like DC was doing like a 52,
Yeah, it was
right before the new 52.
Yeah, it was called Countdown. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
okay.
So it was Countdown. I think it was just called 52, and then the sequel to that was Countdown, and the sequel was garbage, and 52 was good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was kind of going on. So I'm like just getting into Green Lantern, and then DC decides like, hey, we're restarting everything. In 2011, like the new 52 came out. So that's when I jumped into DC hardcore. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, they thankfully didn't change really anything. They kept the status quo of everything Green Lantern and Batman. So I dove into DC in a big way. And I was still buying Marvel stuff. Pretty much I've never stopped buying Spider-Man and Captain America and Punisher. I stuck with DC all through New 52. And then when they relaunched Rebirth, I really, that just drove me away from DC. So it kind of pushed me into Marvel even harder. And then, yeah, I mean, once a couple years ago, I got into the Marvel Unlimited app. I mean, I still have a pull list at my comic book store, but I'm really not reading much that I'm pulling. I just collect them, and then I'm reading everything on the Marvel Unlimited app. So,
yeah, I've pretty much no longer get like a monthly or weekly comics anymore. I mean, I'll go in for a special issue here or there, and I do like to support the comic shop, my local comic shop, the best I can. But everything's kind of gone app based or trades at this point.
Okay.
Partly because I just don't have the room anymore. It's yeah, I could blow money on comics if I want, but there's more important things to blow money on. And I actually first got into the app. My co-host Perry had the DC Universe app before everything folded.
Yeah.
But it was actually a pretty cool app. He loaned it to me, and so I started reading some of the the Rebirth stuff because I was interested. And I'm like, oh, they're bringing the original Superman back. How's this going to work? And I never got into the New 52. I tried.
Oh, okay.
I just never got into it. But by that point I was kind of getting out of comics on a regular basis. Like I no longer could handle the continuous events and the continuous, like, oh, I gotta get the next issue, gotta get the next issue.
Yeah.
By that point, I was like already dwindling what I was collecting. But yeah, I mean, I obviously when that app kind of went away, I was looking around for some stuff, and I know I talked to you, Travis, offline a few times about it, and you're like, no, I recommend it. So
Yeah.
so I'm so glad I got it, which through our conversations about what we're reading and suggesting to each other and stuff like that. That's kind of where our conversation for this podcast started germinating.
Oh,
yeah. Just from that app. I think it's a great app. I'm going back through all the classic X-Men because years past I have a lot of the actual X-Men, Uncanny X-Men floppies from like 200 on to it was past 300 at that point, and with some gaps here and there. And that was always my goal when I went to like the Comic Cons. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna try and fill the gaps, and it's just it was a bit too much. So I started getting the essentials actually.
Oh, okay.
And they're great because you can read them, but they were they're newspaper print, they're black and white.
Yeah.
You're not getting the full story. Or the full experience, I should say. But so now going back and I'm reading X-Men from the beginning on the app, and it's so great. Like the colors are vibrant and stuff I never I just wouldn't have had access to unless I put down a pretty penny. So but I was a DC guy myself. I let me just say I'm a Marvel guy through and through. Always have been.
Same here. Yeah.
Yeah. Make mine Marvel. However, Superman is probably one of the greatest. I mean, to me, Superman and Spider-Man are tied for the two best superheroes out there. I mean, are they always my favorite? I think Captain America and Wolverine could be my favorite at times, but Superman and Spider-Man will always have a place in my heart, and I think it's like choosing which kid you love the most type thing. It's like I love them both for different reasons, but
sure.
I really got sucked into DC. When I was collecting my first go around, high school, middle school, it was all Marvel. Few DC things here and there, just couldn't get into it. I think it was around Emperor Joker time frame that I was, I got all the Death of Superman stuff, which I thought was great. That was another big thing, right at a key time moment of my collecting. But yeah, as far as Batman, I mean, as far as DC, I should say, it was right around Emperor Joker time frame that I was like, man, I really like the art. This is fascinating. Like Joker's is the villain in a Superman comic, and I just started picking more and more stuff up, and I really started getting into DC as well. So I was reading both DC and Marvel, especially when they started gearing up for Infinite Crisis. I was like, oh, are they doing what I think they're doing? I went back and started reading the old Crisis on Infinite Earths, or Earths, as my kids tease me for saying, because I say it too fast. But
welcome to Earth.
I know exactly. I said, but they're like, what are you talking about here? But anyways, yeah, Infinite Crisis really kind of got me full on into all things because of the 52, the countdown, just everything led up to it. Everything fell out from it. It was pretty great, but it was around the New 52 time where I was already starting to wash my hands of comics again, just because it's at some point something's got to give, you know. Well, what about you? What's one of your favorite characters? I heard you kind of like maybe not agree with my comparison of Spider-Man and Superman being tied. So who would you say is your favorite, but also who would you say is like maybe one of the best characters? You know, because they can be different.
Mine are probably the same. My favorite is Spider-Man, and I think he's the greatest, you know, comic book character. Superman is definitely up there. He's definitely, for me, a close. I don't know. I don't even. I'll get into Superman. For me, Spider-Man is. He never gives up. You know, he will do everything possible, you know, to save a life or to he'll sacrifice himself, you know, to get the job done. I mean, every time, you know, he'll sacrifice his personal life, you know, he'll tank his job, his relationships, you know, if it comes down to doing what he has to do to save somebody, you know, he's going to get it done. And I just love that just indomitable, like, spirit, you know. I love a good underdog character that just is always, like, he's just always in the dumps, you know. He's a sad sack. He's a lovable loser, you know. But Spider-Man is great, you know. Peter Parker suffers for it. I just love that, like, cause and effect of that character. So, yeah, he's top on my list as far as favorite and what I think is the best. I'd put, you know, Captain America is probably my number 2, and then I'd say maybe Superman, and I love Green Lantern for that willpower, that, you know, unbreakable will, that sort of thing. I'm into. Yeah, those are my, like, I don't know, Mount Rushmore, I guess, of comic book characters.
Yeah, those are some good. I've always liked Green Lantern, but more because I just thought he was cool. Like, wouldn't it be awesome to have one of those rings? You know, like you don't have to have power per se. You just have to have a ring. You know, it's like you weren't born with it. You weren't freak accident or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I want radioactive spiders biting me. You know.
Oh man, I remember watching Spider-Man the movie, you know, in 2002. And at the end of it, he's swinging through the city, and it's you know, the music is swelling, and he's swinging through New York. And I remember crying because at that moment, I was like, I'm never going to, like, I think in the back of my head, a little childish part of me was like, I don't know, maybe one day I'll get some kind of superpower. And then watching that movie in that moment, I was like, I'll never be able to do that, you know. And it was just like, I was seeing it, I was happy to see it, you know, because it felt so real, and like they finally brought Spider-Man on screen and made me believe a man could swing, you know. And like, it just hit me like, oh wow, this is the really real world, and what I'm seeing is you know, fantasy. And it just, you know, blew me away at the time, but it was like, oh well, I'm never gonna get there, you know. So kind of a what do you call it? A double-edged sword of like, I love this thing, but it's also like crushing me because I realized like, yeah, I'll never, you know, get bitten by a radioactive spider and get powers, you know.
Way to bring everybody down.
I know.
You hear that, kid? Kids, real world sucks.
Yeah. Lower those expectations now, because you'll save yourself a lot of heartbreak.
Well, since we're sharing stories like that, I remember having a similar feeling of like, I'm never going to be Luke Skywalker.
Oh, yeah.
At far too old of an age.
Absolutely. In 2002, when I'm watching Spider-Man, 19, 18, 19. Way too old to be like, maybe I'll get superpowers one day.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I was in the United States Marine Corps. I was probably about the same age, 18, 19. And I remember I think I was watching Star Wars afterwards, and I was just like, man, I'm never going to be able to have like, Jedi powers.
Yeah.
It's very funny that you say that because it's like it must be something about that, like, becoming a man and like losing your innocence, and it's just like, I've changed. I'm a man now.
Childhood's over the moment you're never going to be a superhero.
Right.
Yeah. I remember when I was, I don't know, 11 or 12 maybe, and I more than anything, I desperately wanted to have a tail like Nightcrawler. I wanted a prehensile tail because it just seemed like, you could like, swing it around. I mean, I was like watching the X-Men cartoon, he was in 2 episodes of that, I think. And I was playing the X-Men video game with him in it and collecting trading cards with Nightcrawler. For a while, he was like my favorite character. But yeah, I wanted a tail so bad when I was, my parents were really concerned at the time. They were like, the kid wants a tail. I don't know what's wrong with him. But
maybe he'll grow out of it.
I maintain that I think a tail would be super handy and fun as hell to have. But
oh yeah, I mean, it could be your friend, especially.
Put a little hat on it.
Exactly. Do tricks. Yeah. I when people ask what superpower would you want? Well, I think we just answered yours. You want a tail like Nightcrawler's, but yeah,
somewhere between Spider-Man and Nightcrawler. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not one I usually think of, but it's valid. It's definitely valid. Excellent.
I mean that's a lot of like us talking about our comic history. Well, I will say like now what I'm reading, and probably for the past, I don't know, 3 years maybe. I probably had Marvel Unlimited for 2 years, maybe 3. But what I've done is I went back to the 60s. I went back to starting with Fantastic Four because I never really cared for Fantastic Four. But I decided, like, I'm just going to go to where it started, and I'm going to go in release order. So I started reading Fantastic Four until whichever character came next, Iron Man or Hulk, probably Hulk. And then, so what I've done is I treat it as if I'm going to, the spinner rack as a not necessarily as a kid, but as if these comics are just coming out. So I read everything from Fantastic Four, Hulk, Strange Tales, Tales to Astonish, which is like, well, that's Hulk and Namor. Tales of Suspense, which is Iron Man and Captain America, and there's one more. But then like Thor and Doctor Strange, I Avengers. I read through all of those at X-Men as well. But yeah, I read them in release order. So I'll read, Avengers, and then I jump to Iron Man, and then I jump to Thor. So I basically read all of those issues for that month, and then I go back and start, at the cycle kind of all over again. I'll read the next issue. Like I said, just kind of treating it as if these issues are coming out. Like I've got to wait for the next issue. So meantime, I'm going to read, Thor or Captain America or whatever. So it's been fun to go through, to experience the Marvel comic universe kind of in order, really. So that's what I've been doing with the Marvel Unlimited app. And then I also did, like, first thing I did when I got the app was I started with Amazing Fantasy and read all of Spider-Man. So I'm caught up. I'm like in the almost late 90s with Spider-Man. And then I start like probably somewhere I was in like 70s or 80s. And then I went back and started reading, like I said, all the Marvel stuff. So that's what I do with the app mostly. And then of course I read modern stuff. I think you got me into, you recommended Annihilation, and that turned me on to the cosmic side of Marvel. I never cared about anything cosmic Marvel related, you know. Silver Surfer, most of the Fantastic Four stuff I didn't care about, but characters like Quasar, you know, like who the hell, you know, Captain Marvel, Nova, couldn't care less about any of these characters. They were all just like, I'd recognize them by name, you know, and by sight, but I couldn't tell you anything about most of those. But now it's like I've fallen in love with the cosmic side of Marvel, primarily that Abnett and Lanning kind of I mean they reinvented the cosmic Marvel universe like in I think it was like 2006, you know, and through like 2008 or 9 when they kind of wrapped everything up. So like I've fallen in love with Nova. I mean he's up there, like he's probably up there as far as I'd maybe put him number 5 in my top, you know, favorite character list and everything. So
yeah, he's a Spider-Man kind of
copycat
for sure.
And,
you know, early on when, you know, if I saw something from Nova, he was a new warrior. He was, you know, I knew he was. I didn't think of him in terms of basically Green Lantern Corps.
Sure.
Until that Annihilation stuff, and I'm like, oh no, you're right. They're like, he's great. I love him. It's that I was not a big cosmic guy either. I mean, I like the Infinity Sagas and all that stuff. But as far Adam Warlock, I mean, he had to be a part of the Infinity stuff, but the more he was used, that like I loved him in Infinity Gauntlet, but then the more I kept seeing of him, the more I hated him.
Okay.
I was never into that stuff. That's not what I collected. I'm, you know, collecting Spider-Man at street level. You know, some Avengers stuff here and there, but you know, that run of Annihilation Conquest, Guardians of the Galaxy Rebirth, all that stuff, I was like, it was so well done. And I had already kind of started. I think there was some Thor stuff where he was like King Thor, and it was like in the future, and it was a little more cosmic, and so that already kind of like got me willing to branch out, you know, like I was reading that, and yeah, so I'm like totally.
There's some really good Thor stuff in the mid 2000s, 2006, 2007. There's a really good Thor run. And I never would have read Thor, but reading Thor from the 60s, like he became one of my favorite characters. I love Thor now. So yeah, I've been reading some of the more modern Thor stuff. I'm getting to the Jason Aaron Thor stuff. I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm definitely going to. And
yeah, I really got into Thor with Eric Masterson and
okay.
You know, Bearded Thor, Thunderstrike, you know, or Thunderstruck.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know. There was something about the look of the character then and then it made me like, well, what happened to real Thor? Where's Thor?
Yeah,
you know, because at the time, you know, I was collecting sporadically and I wasn't collecting Thor, but I would get Avengers, and here's a guy pretended to be Thor basically,
right?
And I wanted to know, like, well, where is real Thor? And I had a couple issues of where Thor came back, but I'm like, well, I never quite learned exactly how that predicament happened in the first place, where Thor was missing, and now Eric Masterson. I mean, I know how Eric Masterson became Thor, but I never found out what happened with Thor. So that's something maybe as we're going through this, you know, that might come up, and I might be able to learn something I didn't know along the way. But Thor is one of my favorites, and I think it was because of Eric Masterson. Of course, I love Chris Hemsworth as Thor. I mean, I love Thor movies and Thor and the Avengers. I mean, he's no Cap, but but he's up there for me. So yeah. So speaking of, are there any events that you're looking forward to, either rereading or reading for the first time?
Let me think. I'd like to. I never really read the Dark Phoenix saga, or the Phoenix saga. I mean, either of them. I'm looking forward to some X-Men stuff like that I've never really gotten into. I mean, I revisited Secret Invasion this last year, and that is event that holds up. I read all the tie-ins, and that's like 100 issues.
Yeah.
When it's all said and done, and that was fun. But no, there's definitely so much stuff from the 70s that I don't know. We'll get into it. Yeah. I mean, I wrote that question down. I didn't really think to answer it for myself.
Right.
Is there anything that you can think of or that you are looking forward to?
Well, I mean, one of the first things I did with the Marvel app was I went and reread Operation Galactic Storm, which is an Avengers maybe 92. Clearly a play on Operation Desert Storm.
Sure.
And it was a kind of a cosmic thing. I remember liking it at the time. I had most of the issues, had a few gaps here and there. So if I hadn't already just reread that, that would have been top on my list to say, I can't wait to reread that,
Yeah.
But for some strange reason, the Marvel app doesn't consider that a crossover an event. It's like not in a reading list. I had to build the reading list myself.
Oh,
I mean, all the issues are there, but it's not, I don't know why they just don't. It's to me, it was a pretty big story. Anyways, I'm not sure. I mean, I love a lot of the X-Men like crossovers, like because when everybody kind of gets together. And a few years back, I reread Extinction Agenda. I like that. Speaking of, I'm actually looking forward to reading Executioner Song again, rereading that. That one I really liked. I definitely think I feel like it'll hold up. I know some people don't like it, but I thought it was amazing, and it's one I've revisited in the past, but I'm looking forward to reading that again and make sure I still, agree with that. I'm with you. A lot of the 70s, especially some of the Thanos stuff, I'm just not really aware of it. It's not till Infinity Gauntlet where I finally start learning more of the cosmic stuff. So I wouldn't mind filling some gaps. I don't know how much I'm going to like them. I'm not sure how, like... Oh, sorry, you going to say something?
I'm looking through, like, the list of events. The Kree Skrull War, some of that stuff, like, I don't have any history with. That one I think I'm really looking forward to now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I actually loaned that to my daughter after we watched Wanda and Scarlet. I always say it, Wanda and Scarlet. WandaVision, because they're both in it.
Okay.
And it was one I had read, like easily accessible because I had the trade paperback. Whether or not she read it is another story. Some of those early stuff, like I forget that the plot sounds more epic than the actual issues are because I'm used to a more modern style, and then you read something from the 70s and 80s, and you have to put yourself in that mindset. That comics were different then, so you have to, and maybe this is the first time something happened, so like my expectations need to be a little lower sometimes because they hadn't perfected the line-wide event, or maybe it isn't as epic as it sounds when you hear somebody talk about it. But we'll see. We'll definitely, that's something that we will probably discuss.
Yeah. Anything that you're not looking forward to?
Civil War.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. In fact, as a matter of fact, when they announced that Captain America 2 was going to be Civil War, or no, that was Winter Soldier. 3 was going to be Civil War. I was like, why? They're gonna, by that point, I hadn't freaking realized that I should give, utmost faith in MCU that they're not going to, because what they did is they took a great idea and distilled it down to a great movie, where I think, Mark Millar has great ideas. He's not good at writing a good story. And then I think the way, just for me, and I should save this for when we finally get there, but I didn't like a lot of the tie-ins to it because there was no consistency. People were acting out of character all the time. They would depict the Negative Zone prison one way in the main series, and then it looked worse than Guantanamo Bay in the next series. I'm seriously, and it was supposed to be Guantanamo Bay. And of course, at the time, I'm now an adult reading this, and I'm like, please try to separate politics away from the comic. Not saying the comic shouldn't be political. I'm telling myself, don't read into what's going on. Take the story for what it is. And I just I couldn't read the main thing and then the tie-ins, and then I couldn't make them make sense to each other. And I was just, I love the Punisher. I thought I didn't really like. I just didn't like it. I just didn't like it. That's all there is to it. There was a lot of things that didn't make sense to me, but I understand. Like, it's a great idea, and I like how things like kind of spilled out from that event, and it cascaded into, or it like dominoed into all these other events that came after, which I really like.
Sure.
So it's a big seminal thing. I think I'm in the minority too of saying I don't like it.
Right.
So in one respect, I am looking forward to revisiting it to see if I still don't like it, because it's far enough away from real world events of what was going on at the time. But also I can also understand, like, stuff that used to drive me nuts doesn't drive me as nuts now. Like I said, the inconsistency between one title and the next, that's not the end of the world. But there are some things in there I'm sure I'm going to still hate, and I'll point them out when we get there.
Now that'll be fun to talk about. I think when I think of Civil War, like, that to me is the one event I think that has made the biggest ripples in the Marvel comic universe. Like, I think it is, like, everything that came after it for a long time was a direct, it's like you go from Civil War to like Annihilation is going on kind of at the same time, and you find out that no one came to help with Annihilation because they just thought, like, it's just like a border dispute, right? And we're fighting amongst ourselves, here on Earth. And then that leads into, like,
Planet Hulk.
Secret Invasion, and then you got, like, Siege and Dark Reign, like, just one event after the next. I think really, like, kind of tie back to Civil War. So I think I would say it did the most as far as pulling the Marvel universe together, while at the same time, like, driving a huge wedge between everybody,
for sure. It's a very important comic.
Yeah, it's an important run.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, I think it changed the Marvel universe more than any other event, I think. Because most other events, it seems like everything goes back to status quo. Like, think about, Infinity Gauntlet. It's this great story that goes for, is it 6 issues?
I think it's 6 issues.
But nothing really changes because it goes back to status quo at the end of it. Several other things, like Secret Wars. It literally, like, everyone comes back and they arrive back on Earth like the exact moment they left or whatever. It's like no one knows.
Yeah, slight changes, nothing. Nothing. I mean, slight changes to some characters here and there. Yeah. Nothing that line-wide changes Marvel as a whole.
Now, probably over in the X-Men side of things, like, I would say the Phoenix stuff, had lasting repercussions, but I don't know that era of X-Men well enough to know, like, what changed, So I would say the one story I'm not looking forward to is Age of Apocalypse. And that's probably because I didn't read it at the time. I was aware of it. Like, I remember, like, oh, Wolverine looks cooler and different, and I knew, vague things about it. And then a couple years ago, I tried reading it on Marvel Unlimited, and I just could not get into it. So that's one that I'm not really looking forward to.
I can kind of get that, because even at the time, I thought it was the most amazing thing that was going on, because, I read Legion Quest. I was reading all the X-Men stuff leading up to it, and I did my best to get everything that I could. But I do have gaps of what I collected. But if I recall, there was still some aesthetics to that, series I didn't like, and there was still some, like Excalibur was, I'm just using that as an example. Maybe it was Generation Next or whatever, that I was just like, I don't like what they're doing here, but it's still part of the story. But overall, I thought that was great, and I do want to revisit, but I think it would be hard I think we'd almost have to do it in a way that like you kind of did with the early '60s stuff, is go from one issue to the next, not one series to the next, because they all kind of, there's like a, bookends, and I think stuff happens in between, like in between, that you can't just read one then go back and read the other, and then to get, because you got to get to the point of where everything goes back to normal. Spoiler alert.
Sure.
But I do think that would be hard to read and have the same effect. But so I probably will not like it as much just for that. But I'm curious to see, because I loved that at the time. I thought it was cool. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this.
Yeah. That kind of, I think, ties into what the plan is for this podcast. Like we've said, now we're an event podcast, but what does that mean? Like, and we looked at several websites that publish, like, here's a list of every event, and most of the lists start with Reed Richards and Sue Storm's wedding from 1965, Fantastic Four annual number 3. But it's like, if you think about it, this really all starts with, we decided, this starts with the introduction of Namor and Human Torch back in 1939. So that's where we're starting. It's not necessarily an event that the characters were introduced. We're not going to do every single Marvel character introduction as an event, but we thought it made sense to start there. We're going to do their first meeting, which is going to be like maybe our second official episode. And I think along the way we're going to talk about other things, like, here in the 1940s, a lot of the Marvel writers and artists, they leave, they go to war. I think we're going to do an episode on that. So it'll kind of be a comic book history podcast and a world history podcast in a way. Like, we're going to do like special episodes like that, I think.
Yeah, I think the mission statement, as you said, is we'll hit the big events, but we have different ideas of what it constitutes an event, as opposed to some of these other, even Marvel doesn't list some of this stuff that I would consider an event.
Yeah.
In their crossover, which is on their website, which is crazy to me. So, we've kind of discussed, and we'll continue to discuss, and I'm sure we'll miss stuff. So people can please feel free to let us know. And I'm sure Travis will tell you where you can do that, before we go. But, we want to hit the big events, the big crossovers, the big storylines. They don't necessarily have to be line-wide events, but of course, if it is line-wide, we're pretty much hitting it. But to us, the introduction of, say, Captain America would be an event.
For sure,
but not Flag Smasher, so we don't have to hit every, except, but some of the big guys, because we're going to see them again, and they're characters that, there's fallout even to them just being there. So we want to get into the background, but you're right. We've already talked about a few kind of special episodes that we want to hit, because it is a timeline of the events, and we're keeping most of this in Marvel Universe. However, there are things outside of reality affects the universe, like war, so, and some of these all the creators are worthwhile. Some have had a bigger influence than others, and some had, it may be worth talking about, some of these creators on their own episode, so that way we can focus on their story when we get to the story. So I think it should be fun, and we're here to educate ourselves and others.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we'll get a lot out of this. I mean, I've already, in doing the research for, Marvel Comics #1 from 39, like learning about the guy that created Human Torch, Carl Burgos, and then Bill Everett, who created Namor. Like, these guys are interesting people that I never knew. I could never have told you who came up with Human Torch. I could have told you that Human Torch's name is Jim Hammond, but I didn't know the guy that created him and kind of some of his story. But So yeah, I think it's going to be worthwhile to. We're going to be talking about the people that created these characters and these events, at least in the beginning here. I don't know how much we're going to have to talk about in the Atlas Comics days. I mean, we're going to look and see what's there. I mean, a lot of that stuff is available on Marvel Unlimited, but as far as new characters that have long-lasting, careers from Atlas, I don't know that there's going to be many. I think that's kind of the time period where it was a lot of Western comics and romance comics and stuff like that.
Yeah, Monster of the Week,
yeah. So we may not do as many episodes that touch on Atlas, but who knows? We might find some stuff that's worthwhile. I hope so.
And nothing says we can't go back if we miss something.
Yeah. The idea will be to kind of hit everything in release order, but yeah, there's no rules that say we can't. Oh, we missed this thing or this character or this creator. Let's go back and look at it. So yeah, we'll kind of keep it loose. We're not going to publish a master list of every single event that we plan to cover because we want to keep it kind of fluid. We'll probably announce what we're planning to do next. Maybe the next 2 things we're going to talk about or something like that. So you have a chance to read ahead, that sort of thing. And I would like to welcome questions and comments. So, read ahead and, send us questions about whatever event we're going to be talking about next, that sort of thing. And we can address those on future episodes and
yeah, that'd be great.
Have our own letters column.
Oh yeah. We'll do our best thing. We'll do our best Stan Lee to, get on our soapbox and we'll go from there. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Let's see.
Well, where can they find us then?
We're pretty much Marvel Events Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And then we haven't created it yet, but there will be a Facebook group, I imagine, because I think we'd like to get some interaction going over there and just have a kind of build our own community there, have a place where listeners can come and just, talk and talk about either the episode itself or, just comic book stuff in general. So I think that'll be in the show notes of this episode. We will establish it by the time we publish, Yeah, that's kind of the plan. It's not going to be a news show. We're not going to be doing up to date comic book news or movie news because, we want this to kind of be evergreen and we're not necessarily publishing these episodes right after we record them. So, and we will have guests, I think, in the future. So if there's an event that you're really looking forward to or you've never read before but you want to be a guest on, I think we're going to be open to that. So we'll figure out how to kind of organize that down the road, but we will have guests for sure.
Right now it's just like the creation of the Marvel Universe is very fluid. We're finding our feet and I think but I think we have a plan and I think we have a solid plan, and I really hope that people listening to this, tell your friends, anybody that might be interested in comics or podcasts. We'd love to have as many people join us on our journey through the Marvel Universe.
For sure, yeah. Marvel, we're going to be shilling the hell out of the Marvel Unlimited app, so, throw something our way.
I am not above pimping for Marvel.
Absolutely not.
Make mine Marvel.
Yeah. Personally, you can find me on Twitter at @ThaTravisBow. I'm on Instagram. What am I on Instagram? Who cares?
Tebow Baggins?
Tebow Baggins, that's it. Yeah. And you can find me over on Real Comic Heroes. That's real with 2 E's. We'll continue going through comic book movies over there. You can find my completed Movies by Minutes podcast. Just search Watchmen Minute pretty much everywhere. That's kind of what I've been up to. So you can check those things out. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, my Twitter is Lockhart Brian, and it's Bryon. It's not BR.
It's not Byron.
It's not Byron, basically. It's Lockhart Brian, and that's my personal Twitter. But I also run the Marine Corps Movie Minute, social media. So we have the Marine Corps Movie Minute pod over on Instagram and MCMM_podcast for Twitter as well. So if anybody wants to, find me there, I'd be happy to chat with you. And again, if you want to check out the podcast while you're there, feel free. Got to do a little shilling.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. That's where and of course you can find Travis and I both at the Marvel events social media stuff.
Yeah. So I guess look forward to the next episode. We will be talking about Marvel Comics #1 from August or October of 1939. I want to say it was released in August, but has a cover date of October, I think is the way that works.
I think that was something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So yeah, we're going to be talking about that issue. It's available on Marvel Unlimited. We're going to primarily focus on the Human Torch and Namor sections. We are going to talk about kind of the rest of the book. There's like 3 or 4 other stories, but they don't have the legs that Human Torch and Namor do. So we're going to talk about them, but not as in depth as those 2 main stories. So
sounds like a plan.
Yeah. So I don't know how we're going to end these episodes, but I think.
Well, since it's our pilot episode,
yeah,
I think they can forgive us until we
until
we finally figure out the best way to end it.
Yeah.
Did you have something in mind?
I was thinking make mine Marvel, but that's obviously just stealing from our betters. So maybe we'll find some other way to end these episodes. But right. I think for now, I'll just say, thanks for listening, and should be a fun journey.
Yeah, a journey through the time stream. I don't know. I'm trying it live.
I don't mind that. I don't mind that.
Okay.
Come back next time for the continuing journey with Travis and Brian. Until then, join the conversation over at facebook.com/groups/Marvel Events Timeline. On Twitter and Instagram at Marvel Events Pod, or email the show at marveleventspod@gmail.com.